Well, ladies and gentlemen, we know that the Canadian election has been called for April 28th, a little bit over a month from now. Pierre Poilievre taking on Mark Carney. Those are the two main players when it comes to this election, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. And so, as you can see, originally, we started the year with Poilievre, significant advantage. It was seeming like the Conservative Party was going to get the vast majority of seats in the House of Commons. But now we can see recently with the rhetoric of Trump and Poilievre really trying to detach himself from Trump, create kind of his own persona because Canadians hate Trump, especially with the rhetoric of Trump potentially taking all of Canada. Some people saying it's a joke, some people saying it's not. You add to that the tariff situation with Canada, and it's become a bit of an issue, and Trump has become hated throughout much of Canada. We know Canada's more liberal anyways, but it's like next level now. And so it's become a bit of a bigger problem for Poilievre in terms of winning this election. And Carney, who's been slingshot a little bit into the lead there since it's come back down to where it's a tie now. But Carney was installed. Really, nobody voted for him. It's kind of like a situation in the United States to where if the VP takes over for the president, that's kind of what happened with Carney and Trudeau. But Carney is completely unqualified. The question is, who should Americans want to win? Well, you would think if you're a conservative, you're a Republican, you would want Poilievre. If you're a liberal, a Democrat, you would want Carney. And honestly, as an American, I don't think it matters too much just in terms of Canada itself becoming more powerful under a conservative versus under a liberal, just because the United States is so much powerful already than Canada. But there's a bigger situation to follow when it comes to this election. And honestly, for me, I'm not going to say it's a win-win no matter who wins this election, but there are some significant advantages if Mark Carney wins this election when it comes to potentially annexing some provinces in Canada. Now, I would project, and as you can see, based on this map right here, this was the 2021 Canadian federal election. And they have the colors the opposite in a sense to where you can see the Conservative Party is in blue, and you see those two provinces that are very conservative. That would be Saskatchewan and Alberta, and looks like the southern part of Manitoba as well that is conservative. These were the provinces we were talking about potentially annexing, and I think it would be contingent on the idea of a Mark Carney victory. Because at that point, I mean, Liberals have had a 20% approval rating. They've been in office forever. They've had the majority power in Canada for a very long time. And so it would be very demoralizing for the Conservatives in Alberta, Saskatchewan, who already feel slighted, dealing with a situation to where Mark Carney comes out of nowhere, can barely even talk. You see him during these interviews. He's completely, he doesn't even want to meet with Trump. He's like scared to do it. Imagine he wins after like campaigning for a month. Now they call this snap election because suddenly they're in the lead and it's going to be happening. Originally they were like, we're going to let the election go back. It was going to be, I mean, the actual election is supposed to happen on the 20th of October, but everyone knew it was going to be earlier. But now that they've gained this momentum, they want to call for this election and they want to steal this election in a sense. And so you can even see how British Columbia votes. It's very similar to like Oregon, where the coast where Vancouver is a lot more liberal than kind of more inland, almost like Washington, with Washington State, a lot of it being rural and conservative versus Seattle. And so British Columbia would also potentially be added. You know, I've talked about this Arctic Empire for Donald Trump and how important this is. And listen, I will say if Poilievre wins, it just doesn't make sense unless, I mean, there was some type of coalition formed between the new Democrat Party, the new Democratic Party in Canada, along with the Liberal Party, because it depends how many seats the Conservatives are able to win if they do win, if Poilievre does get the majority, because there could be a coalition formed between those parties, although it does seem like it's probably unlikely at this point. So I would say either way, I mean, there's pros and cons to this, but if we want to potentially try and annex or just add Alberta and Saskatchewan, those would be the two main ones. It would be Alberta, then Saskatchewan, then maybe Manitoba. Then we'd have to add British Columbia because it's isolated, even though it's liberal. And then we would just straight up buy the three territories from Eastern Canada in a financial deal. And so I would probably say we want Carney to win, honestly, just because we want, it would be very interesting. Now, for Canada's sake, if you're a conservative and you want to see Canada in a better light in the future when it comes to immigration, some of these other things, then you want Polyev to win for sure, because now he's pushing back against immigration. That's why he's going back up in terms of the betting. I also think it's kind of like the overreaction that we saw with Kamala. Everyone's been talking about that with Canada, to where Trump was up throughout the entire summer. They install Kamala randomly, then she goes up suddenly. Now she's leading, very similar to Trudeau stepping down and now Carney coming in, and suddenly the Liberal Party has a chance, when in reality it's probably just this fake hype. Same thing that we saw with Harris in the U.S. election in 2024. So I would probably say I'd slight, and Trump has said he'd probably the Liberal win. That's what he said, because Polyev has not been too fond of Trump, and it's a very hard situation for any conservative in Canada, just because of how radioactive Trump is to the Canadians. If you are a conservative, technically Trump is also a conservative, but in the United States, we know in Canada, pretty much everything is just more liberal. It's a lot more similar to the EU. That's why if Carney wins, there's going to probably be a big push to just be up the EU's ass and join the EU, and they're already obsessed with that, especially if NATO falls apart. You could get Canada really shifting to be a more European liberal type society. They're talking about expanding and doubling their population because of how underpopulated Canada is, and they're just going to infest the major. I mean, they've already done it. You go to Toronto, you see some of these videos from malls in Toronto. It is disturbing. And that's from poor leadership. And that, you look at what happens, you look at the result in society. Leadership is important. These policies are extremely meaningful in terms of affecting quality of life for the natural born citizens. And you get this liberalism just like they have in the EU. And you start to see these cities and you look at them, it's like, oh, this is not good. You've destroyed parts of your own country. But Alberta, Saskatchewan, and even British Columbia, although outside of Vancouver, I've been here, it's just a liberal cesspool. It's like communist. Vancouver is, but at least it's like socialist. But outside of that, there's some very nice ski resorts in British Columbia. We would have to take British Columbia on because we wouldn't want it to be isolated. But what I'm saying is, Trump wants to build his Arctic empire. It might be better here if Carney wins for the United States. The thought process is the people in Alberta, Saskatchewan, some in Manitoba would feel great despair if the Conservatives lost yet again. And there would be an immediate pushback and a potential thought of kind of finding an avenue for Alberta to secede from Canada, hold a referendum, secede, and then join the United States as a territory, and then getting statehood's like a 5 to 10 year process. So those provinces would not be voting in U.S. elections probably until 2032 or 2036, I would say. Certainly not 2028. That's if this all happened relatively soon. Some people say, no, it's going to take time. It's going to take like multiple years to even have them secede and join the United States. But if they join, they would join as territories originally, then they apply, then they become states. But the three upper territories, they would stay as territories because they don't have the population. Even if they became states, they'd only have like 3 electoral votes. They're very liberal native areas that would be added by the United States as part of a deal with the Eastern Canadian government, because then it'd be Western Canada would be annexed and be part of the United States. Eastern Canada would remain Canada, I would imagine, but you don't know with Quebec. Quebec has tried to become independent many times in their past history, and so maybe they become independent and it creates a more unstable position. But that's what we really don't want. We really want Eastern Canada to stay together, because I'm not interested in adding Eastern Canada to the United States at all. I do not think it would be good for the country. Those areas are very, very liberal. And I mean, it wouldn't be catastrophic because Canada, believe it or not, they just don't have a ton of people. Now, I mean, it still is a lot. I mean, if you compare it to certain states, but it is like the population of California, all of Canada. It's pretty remarkable. So it wouldn't be catastrophic if the whole country joined the United States, but I think we wouldn't want that. That's why we're trying to say, well, Trump keeps talking about all of Canada. It's extremely unlikely, and it really doesn't make sense for Republicans to even want that, to want an area like Toronto, to want Quebec, to want Montreal. You would much rather take the western side and maybe even be very selective with an Alberta and a Saskatchewan, or possibly just Alberta, in terms of them being on par with being a conservative state in the United States. And also because of the natural gas and oil that Alberta has, it makes it to where they could certainly get their money's worth better for it in the sense of with Canada, you're dealing with all of these certain regulations when it comes to carbon, and with the United States deregulating a lot of this stuff under Trump, it would be a better environment. And a lot of people in Alberta certainly don't feel. I mean, it's the phenomenon of Greater Idaho. It's we live life a certain way, and these major liberal cesspool cities, which have seen millions and millions of immigrants pour into them, they do not share the same values that we have, and we would like to be represented by our government properly. But if Paul VA wins, then it becomes a bit of a problem in terms of acquiring anything in Canada. I don't think it would happen. But I guess it would be better in terms of you've got a conservative Canada now, although that does create a more, and it's kind of funny because like the opposite, the thought process with Trump potentially trying to buy Canada, it creates this nationalist feel within Canadians to say, no, we're Canadians, we love our flag, we love our country. And that's a conservative point of view. It really is. But because Trump is a Republican doing it, it's kind of slingshotted. It's like this fake hype around the Liberal Party, and that's why they're having this election so soon. It's no coincidence. They go up in Polymarket, they go up in some of these polls by like 1 point, and they immediately call for the election. They want to capitalize off of this fake hype. It's just like the idea of Kamala Harris calling for an election in late August rather than when it was, because if the Liberals were in charge, they could do that if we had a Canadian type system. But we have our election obviously the exact same time every 4 years. So the point of it is maybe if Carney wins, it's better. Either way, you do want Canada, I guess, to be more conservative. You don't want them to be flooded with immigrants. But the thought process is if we want to have a chance to take Alberta, Saskatchewan, maybe all of Western Canada, and do it diplomatically and do it pretty easily to where a lot of the people in Alberta would be willing to join the United States under the right circumstances if they feel disenfranchised by Liberals winning yet again. That can happen a lot more smoothly if the Liberals do win rather than the Conservatives. And then it's like, well, the Conservatives finally get in office. Why would you secede at this point? I mean, I guess there's, depending on what happens in terms of how well the Conservatives are able to govern and how much power they have, maybe there could be issues to where they don't have a ton of the power, even if they have the majority, and it becomes a problem to where Alberta still gets angry about it. We don't know that, but I'm saying just as a clear cut, it would be better in terms of annexing Alberta and Saskatchewan if the Liberal Party won, because then the people of Alberta and Saskatchewan, the conservative voters, would feel disenfranchised. They would feel like there's no hope. Trudeau was a complete failure. They like laughed him out of the parliament there, and then they still win by calling for this snap election. They throw this Carney guy in there. He won't even meet with Trump. He can't even answer questions. You listen to him during an interview. He can't even talk. I mean, do they have debates there? Like, this is the thing with these people. So that's why it would probably be better for Carney to win. That's why I say it's like a win-win. Well, you get conservative government in Canada. Yeah, we want Canada to be stable. We don't want their country flooded with immigrants. It's good, but then we're not going to be able to add, or it's going to be harder to add. I mean, you know, I think with Trump, I'll probably, like, the thing is, about a month ago, I said, I'm done predicting what Trump's going to do with tariffs. And I'm glad that I said that, because now Trump's saying, well, maybe the tariffs on April 2nd will be a lot lighter than they originally were going to be. But there's going to have to be something with the amount of tariffs on Canada. It's hurting their economy. And I'm guessing it's going to be a renegotiation of the trade deal. Now, is that what Trump was angling for this whole time and just threatening them with potentially, I mean, you are threatening them with annexation. That's what them being the 51st state. Trump likes to tone down the rhetoric a little bit. So he doesn't say we're going to annex them. He just says we're going to, we want them to be the 51st state. And it's not aggressive. He says we want them to join us, and it's going to be a better situation. And certainly, I mean, when you look at an Alberta or a Saskatchewan, the tax situation as a territory of the United States rather than a province of Canada is significantly better. Now, the universal healthcare stuff, all that can be figured out, but I think Alberta, they're paying Eastern Canada a significant amount because of the amount of resources they have. And if they could keep that money and use that on their own healthcare, and they could have their own independent thing, I mean, I'm not sure how that would really work, because that is a sticking point if they wanted to become a state in terms of the way healthcare is done in Canada versus the United States. But that's all down the line. They could stay a territory if they want. We would become completely energy independent with Alberta's resources. So it's something that you would look into. But look, this is what I would look at. It's really these 4 provinces, and it's these 3 territories. And so this is the full control, and then here's Alaska right over here. So it's Alaska, it's the 3 territories, and they stay territories. This is where Greenland is. You take Greenland, and then it's these four, and you leave the Eastern Canada alone. The problem is Eastern Canada then becomes unstable, and then possibly if a Liberal gets into office for the United States, the Liberal annexes Eastern Canada because these are just all Liberals. And so then it possibly, because if we added this, like these four provinces, worst case scenario, it's probably, 50-50 conservative Democrat. And then it's probably even, more so in our favor, in the conservative favor, because they would view us as like adding them and helping them out. But it really wouldn't even matter like short term, because they would have to go through a process of becoming a state. It wouldn't just happen overnight. So we could even delay that. Or you could just add Alberta and get certainly Republican. That's going to be a Republican province, Republican state in the United States, even though the conservatives in Canada are a little bit more liberal than they are in the United States. They would still be conservative, we would imagine, if they join the United States, that is. So there's an argument to be made that I say I root for Carney, honestly. Either one. I mean, it's complicated, whoever wins, but Poilievre versus Carney. So we'll have to see. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.